Vote Rejoin EU.
Vote Rejoin EU.
During last year's general election, there were a number of gullible souls who told us that Keir Starmer and most of his potential cabinet were closet Remainers, who, once they had got safely elected, would pursue a constructive and realistic policy towards the European Union that might well lead in due course to our rejoining the European Union. Now, that was always a self-deception, as illustrated by the remark of Keir Starmer on the eve of the general election that he couldn't imagine our rejoining the European Union during his lifetime. Note, not just during his political lifetime, but during his physical lifetime, which should be assessed 20, 30 years. The Labour spokesman, the Labour Minister for Europe, Thomas Symonds, has now gone even further. He says that he can't imagine our rejoining the European Union in his lifetime. He's 45, so he's talking about another 35 or 40 years. That makes it clear, if there were any doubt about it, that Labour is a Brexit party, something which should be noted very much by that majority of the electorate that wants to rejoin the European Union now and recognises that Brexit was a mistake. Whatever you think of the precise details of the present Labour government's attitude towards the European Union, the statement by the Europe Minister is in many respects a bizarre one. First, in the volatile state of British and European politics, geopolitics in particular, how on earth can anybody rationally claim that in 40 years' time we still will be outside the European Union? The natural course of events will be towards much greater European integration in the face of particularly of the Russian threat and the volatility of America. If those circumstances continue, as they seem likely to continue, it seems madness to be excluding a priori any closer relationship with Europe that would be a genuinely integrative relationship. What the Labour government is saying now is that it does not consider itself a part of the European integrative project. And that's a very big thing to be saying for 40 years in advance. Secondly, all economists agree that Brexit has caused a loss to the British economy, 4 or 5% over a period. There are differing estimates. The Labour government is struggling precisely with obtaining a portable path towards growth within the British economy that will be necessary to carry out its ambitious and laudable plans to reconstruct, in particular, public services. It seems perverse that the Labour government, finding it so difficult to stimulate growth without being in the European Union, should exclude, once again, in this sweeping fashion, any rejoining of at least the single market or the customs union. That seems to be cutting off your nose to spite your face and is clearly being done in order to placate what Keir Starmer and his advisors regard as the danger of reform. The curious thing, the particularly bizarre thing about this attitude is that by not talking about Brexit, by accepting Brexit as being an inevitable reality for 40 years, the Labour Party is depriving itself of precisely the most powerful weapon against reform. The most powerful weapon it has against reform is that the one policy with which it's been identified and eager to be identified until recently, namely Brexit, has turned out to be at best a flop, and in the eyes of many, a disaster that's only going to get worse. If the Labour Party say, well, Brexit isn't so bad anyway, and we can make it work, they are gifting to reform a free pass on the enormous mistake that Brexit was, inflicted largely on the British public by Farage and people who think like him. So it would be to the Labour Party's great advantage to stress the damage done by Brexit and lay the responsibility for it firmly at the feet of where it belongs, Nigel Farage and his friends. Some pro-Europeans will have taken some comfort from the remark of Thomas Symonds that he could envisage or possibly envisage in a future manifesto, the Labour Party committing itself to rejoining the single market or the customs union. There are those who think that that will be a stepping stone, a helpful stepping stone to rejoining the European Union. I have great doubts about that. I think it's not at all clear that the rest of the European Union will want us back on those terms. If it's simply a question of cherry picking the economic benefits of being in the European Union, then that's not something that necessarily our partners, our future partners, would regard with any great enthusiasm. Moreover, the negotiations would not be nearly as straightforward as is usually assumed. It's not just a question of Britain saying, we will adopt single market legislation, we'll follow the precepts of the customs union. There would have to be complicated and lengthy negotiations, for instance, about the amount of money the United Kingdom would have to pay to join the single market, about transition periods, about exemptions. There are ensconced interests in the European Union that wouldn't necessarily welcome the United Kingdom back as an economic competitor. These negotiations could be long, difficult and acrimonious. It would be much more sensible politically to go the whole hog and apply to rejoin the European Union rather than try to do it step by step, steps that may well be impossible. But even apart from the practical difficulties of the customs union, joining the customs union and the internal market, there's the political question. If the United Kingdom did aspire in particular to rejoin the single market, it would have to accept the authority of the European Court of Justice. It would be the European Court of Justice that decided whether the United Kingdom was fulfilling its obligations under single market legislation. Single market legislation, moreover, that had been adopted by others, not by the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom played, when it was a member of the European Union, a leading role in forming particularly the single market. It certainly couldn't play anything like that role outside the European Union, but yet aspiring to be a member of the single market. The dominance of the European Court of Justice was one of the great arguments that was thrashed out in the referendum. Supposedly it was intolerable for a foreign court to be imposing its legislation upon the sovereign United Kingdom. Well, that's exactly what would happen in much worse circumstances if we were to rejoin the single market without being members of the European Union. I think politically it's a non-starter, and I think it's intellectual and moral laziness to imagine that we can cherry pick in that way, or that we should want to cherry pick in that way. And the promise from the Labour minister isn't even that would happen in the next manifesto. It's something that they wouldn't rule out. It's curious that when it's got things wrong, like a commitment not to increase taxes, the defence of Peter Mandelson, the defence of Angela Rayner, the Labour Party is willing to die in a ditch for its mistake. But when it has an opportunity to rectify the situation, as in Brexit, in a popular way, in a way that would be economically and politically advantageous to itself, it can't demonstrate any flexibility. The Rejoin EU party is the single party in the United Kingdom which thinks that rejoining the European Union now, is a crucial and vital interest for the United Kingdom. It's something that we'll be advocating continuously every day in our political activities. We'll be standing in elections, we'll be putting out press releases, we'll be making the case for rejoining the European Union in the national interest. I hope as many of you as possible will go to our website and sign up to receive our literature, a notice of our activities. It's a massive national crusade that we hope to be able to initiate, and every long journey begins with a single step. I hope your single step will be to go to our website and sign up on our mailing list.
Vote Rejoin EU. Join the EU vision.